started, and then if people come part way, they'll pick it up. Welcome if you're watching. Welcome if it's the first time you've seen one of these videos. Hello if you've seen the previous ones. Thank you for coming back and watching this one. I'm Jenny Orwin. A business name is Threads of Stillness. I'm a textile artist. I mostly use felt and embroidery. And I'm doing a series of videos looking at how I create my artwork and a few tips. So if you've got wool or threads or whatever at home and you're wondering what to do with them, hopefully you might get a few ideas from this. Apologies if my small daughter, Eleanor, who's 3.5, and a little bit bored at the minute and fed up with being stuck at home. Apologies if she appears. She's being entertained in the house at the minute, but yeah, she's very prone to coming and saying, "Mummy, hello!" So apologies if she appears. I'm in my shed at the bottom of the garden at the minute. This is my studio. I'll do a proper studio tour at some point in the future. Probably be the next video I do, I think. If this is the first one you've watched, I've done 2 previously. The first one was looking at how I developed the idea from a photograph, and the second one was looking at the wet felting part of the process, so how you create the sort of the felt part of the fabric. So if you haven't watched those and you'd like to go back and have a look, then they are available on Facebook. If you go back and look, they were done the last 2 Saturdays, or if you go to the videos tab, they're on there, or if you go to my website, which is www.threadsofstillness.co.uk, then there's a tab there under resources which has these the videos on, and there's also the original photograph that I started with, and there's a PDF download with the some notes from the first video I did. I'll try and get ones done for this session and the second one. I'm afraid the small daughter meant that I didn't manage to get that finished this week, but I'm hoping to get that done. There's also on the website under resources, there's a suppliers tab, so if you're wondering where to get things from, I've done a list of various places that I use to get wool and threads and other things I use. It's not exhaustive, and I'll probably add to it as I go along and remember who I use, but it's there if you're wondering where to find things. And a lot of places are still doing sending out things in one form or another at the minute. So yeah, if you've just arrived, I'm Jenny, and I'm looking this session or this video at how I add the needle felting and the embroidery. Because last time we looked at the wet felting, which is creating the felt, which is, if you like, that then creates the fabric to then add the embroidery over the top. I've done quite a little bit already yesterday and this morning, because there was no way I was going to be able to manage to do all the needle felting and all the embroidery in the space of a short video. Either it would take a very long time, or more likely I'd end up rushing it and ending it with very, very sore fingers. So I thought I'll do most of it and then just leave enough now that you can see how I do it, and hopefully we'll get it more or less finished by the end of the video. With these things, they always end up sitting on my table for a little while, for a few days afterwards, while I look at it and decide what else needs doing. So it doesn't generally get declared properly finished for a few days at least, if not longer. So the first thing I did yesterday afternoon, I got half an hour out in the shed at my studio, and I worked on the needle felting. So I will try and put something together on the website, because I took lots of photographs at the various stages of the needle felting. I will try and work out how to put that into some sort of time-lapse video, and if I manage to win in my fight against the technology to do that, I will put that up there, and I'll put a note on Facebook to say that that's up there as well. so you can see a little bit more about how I did it. What I did more or less is I started by adding that line of its vegetation. On the original photographs, it's sort of grasses and reeds and so on that are all in shadow, so which makes them look quite dark. So I added that line across there because that's quite a definite line between the foreground area and the hills that fade into the background. So that gave me a bit of a starting point to work out how I was going to go from there. This hasn't actually worked out quite how I was planning, partly because I was rushing a little bit and not concentrating on the last video. So rather than having what I was more or less aiming for was third foreground, third hills in the background, third sky, it hasn't quite turned out like that. But I was working with what I've got. I've added that line across there, which creates quite a clear barrier between the foreground area, which is sort of snowy field in the foreground, and then you've got the hills in the background. The next thing I did on the hills in the background was to do quite a bit of work to add some lines. They're not really clear lines, because actually when you look at in the distance, it's hills that disappear, sort of fade off into the background. So I don't really want huge contrast, but I want enough to just suggest that there's rows of hills disappearing off into the background with snow on the top of this one, and then one that was very white right at the background because it had most snow on. I had quite a line of sort of pinkish purple across here. It ended up being a bit too much, so I put more wool over the top of that in a mixture of a much paler pink, and I've introduced this, which is a sort of almost reddish brown. Hazelnut apparently is the name of the colour. All the way across here to suggest those areas where the snow is thin enough that the vegetation underneath is starting to come through. Little bit more green across here to tie that area together, a little bit more on the lines that's suggesting the sort of walls and tracks and so on that are just peeking out the snow. So that's all been left not super clear because it's in the distance, so I don't want lots and lots of detail and lots of clarity in that area because that's all in the distance. So when you look, it's all a bit hazy, it's not that clear. The detail will come more in the foreground, which then helps to give the depth to the picture. I didn't do very much of the sky at all. The sky more or less worked how I wanted it to. I put a little bit more blue in across the line where the hills meet the sky because I wanted quite a clear line between the snow-topped hills and the sky rather than it sort of blending into one another too much. So I've put a bit more blue in there just to get that definition. That was pretty much what I did with the needle felting. I've more or less embroidered the tree today and this morning. I've still got a little bit more, so I'll do that now. A few more branches. I was originally going to put three trees in. I changed my mind a little bit, played around slightly with the proportions, and decided that partly because I had so much mountain in the background, I was better off doing one bigger tree than three quite small trees that would have then looked a little bit less balanced. So I've ended up doing one big tree, one slightly bigger tree, slightly set off to the left. So I'm using, it's called Cruel Wool, Appleton's is the main brand, and it's quite a thin 2-ply wool specifically for embroidery. It's what's traditionally used for if you go to stately homes and you see the sort of bed covers and so on with specific style crewel embroidery, usually lots of slightly stylised trees and plants and animals and so on. This is the wool that would traditionally be used for that type of work. So I've put stabiliser on the back, just helps if I'm doing lots of stitching. This felt is relatively thick, so it would probably be okay, but this just helps to stop if the felt's quite thin. It helps stop the felt pulling apart too much if I've got lots of heavy stitching. I end up using quite a lot of stem stitch, which is what I'm using here. I will try and put a video up at some point, otherwise if you search stem stitch, there are quite a lot of tutorials out there as well. It's slightly softer than, say, back stitch or something like that. It gives a really nice line when you're doing, well, that's what it says on the tin, stems of plants or trees or things like that. What I've done so far is I've done lots and lots of lines of stem stitch which start off all parallel, and then as you go further up the tree they sort of set off out in different directions. So have a look here. I've more or less done this side, so I'm going to add a branch in that I've started it off here, so I'm going to carry on out there and off out this side to build up this side a bit more. Stem stitch is a little bit sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of stitch. So you start off, you almost go 2 steps forward, down, and then come back 1 step and up. So it all overlaps. I'm not using particularly long length of thread, probably not that much more than about maybe 12, 13 inches, something like that, because if it gets too long it just knots and is more likely to break as well. The wool threads, they can sometimes wear out if you've got too long a thread. Sort of aiming off up here somewhere. So I'm not aiming to exactly match the shape of the tree, and I'm certainly not aiming to do every single branch, because it would just get far too cluttered and thick and you'd lose any sort of definition at all. So I'm trying to suggest the larger branches and add enough to suggest the shape of the tree rather than doing an exact copy. So I'm going back along a bit and then adding another branch in up here. I tend to work by eye, particularly if I'm doing something like trees, where actually it doesn't matter if it's not exactly symmetrical or exactly perfect, because trees aren't really. It's one of the things I quite like about trees. They're all slightly different. None of them are exactly symmetrical or exactly the same size or anything like that, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't quite come out exactly how you anticipated. pressure of trying to thread a needle, and that's failed. It's better. So I think I've started. I'll probably add more up there, but if I'll add more along the back, along the line up here, just to fill in up here a little bit. I'll go back later and add lots more branches in and around this area here, and probably some of the ones that had come off down here. I might add some more up there as well, actually, just balance it out a little bit. So that's a work in progress. I'm going to leave that for the moment. In there for the moment. I'll add some of the needle felting at the along the bottom so that you can see how that works. And I'll start by taking the pin out so that I don't try and needle felt into the pin. So that would be a recipe for broken felting needles. Over there. So what I'm wanting to do with this is add some of the, if that was the original photograph you've got along there, you've got lots of vegetation and so on. On the photograph it was a bit dark. I don't think the camera quite coped with the contrast between the sunny hills in the distance and the foreground. But I'm going to add some more vegetation along here. So I'm using Hebridean wool, which from Sheepfold I think it was, which has a really nice texture to it and isn't quite completely black. It's a very dark brown. I don't tend to use sort of pure black, as it were, very much, because you don't very often see that in real life. I tend to use either very dark browns or very dark blues or purples sometimes, depending on what it is. So the thread I was using was, it's very dark, but it's sort of greyish brownish. It's not pure black. And again, this is very dark, but it's not an absolute black. So, but it's got a really nice texture to it, and I really like the texture that I get for needle felting. So I'm just pulling tiny bits off. This is the felting needle, which the needles for felting have tiny little barbs in the needles, which then help the fibres to join together. It does mean that if you prick your fingers, they are incredibly painful. They really hurt. This is this type of brush you can get, or you can get sort of sponge sponge things, you need something underneath that the felting needles can go down into, because they do break quite easily. So the piece goes on top of that. I'm gonna I'm gonna put a little bit more in sort of along here, a bit in front of the tree. So it's slightly odd. And sort of help the base of the tree blend in a little bit. I'm trying to go straight down rather than at too much of an angle. And then I'm slightly less likely to break needles. So I think what I'm going to do with this one is, rather than, I was originally planning to do it as a 5x5 square format, but having looked at what I've ended up with, I think I'm going to change it slightly and probably go for 6x4 or something like that, rather than, it's the way sometimes things work, that you start off with a plan and then it goes in a different direction, which is a bit frustrating sometimes. But if I try and fight it too much, it won't work as well, so I'm better off going with what I've ended up with, rather than trying to argue with it too much. I'm trying to starting to add more of the vegetation sort of dotted around in the field in the foreground. I'm going to do a little bit more over here because I've got the tree over that side, so I'll do a little bit more on this side just to balance out. This is what's called camp, which is slightly more brittle fibres in that you sometimes get that are white. Some of the fleeces. What I tend to do at this stage, obviously I'm not, because I've got the phone doing Facebook Live, is that I'll take lots of pictures as I go along, and then it can sometimes be easier if I've got a picture, if I'm looking at a picture, to sort of look and see what needs changing, what needs adding. I'm trying to only add a little bit at a time, rather than huge amounts in one go, because it's easier just to add a little bit at a time. See, you can add more quite easily, but you can't really take it away particularly easily. So it's better to just do a little bit at a time, rather than having to try and cover something up or take things away later. So I think I'm definitely going to add some more tree branches. I mean, that side needs more work with embroidery and so on. So I'll add more on that side to fill it in as I have on that side. I'll come back and look at the needle felting. I think it's that sort of thing where I'll probably need to go away, come and have a look over a few days until I decide that I'm happy with it. So that's the next stage. I'll put the finished piece up on Facebook when it gets finished. We'll see, that might be in a few days' time, it might be a bit longer depending on how long it takes me to be happy with it. But hopefully that's given a bit of an idea about how I go about adding the embroidery and the needle felting. I also need to go around with the needle felting and find all the straggly bits and get them all in, because there's quite a lot of straggly bits all over the place. But I can go around and sort them out as well. So I'm planning to do some more videos, hopefully. Next one I think is going to be a studio tour. I'm going to see if I can do, if I can set the technology up to do sort of time-lapse videos, and also do more close-up ones, so for example with the embroidery and so on, so that you can really see how I do the stitches and things like that. I'm probably do a mixture of a few more live ones, but I'll probably do some more pre-recorded ones so you can edit out some of the bits where it's a case of, right, well, we'll next do exactly the same thing for the next 10 minutes. So yeah, if you have any ideas for videos, anything you think that you'd like to see in more detail, or any other ideas or things that you'd like to explained or anything like that, please send me a message, put a comment on Facebook or something like that. It'd be lovely to get some ideas. I'll try and do some more videos. I can't promise exactly when. I'll try and I'll see if I can manage to do one a week, but I will see if that happens. And so yeah, please let me know if you have any ideas. Keep an eye on Facebook, because I'll post them on there, and they'll go on the website as well. So please follow the page on Facebook, Threads of Stillness, if you aren't already. Thank you very much if you are following it. But that'll be where there's news about videos and any other resources or anything like that come out. I'll try and keep doing videos and bits and pieces whilst we can't get out and do workshops or anything like that. So thank you very much for watching. Have a look on Facebook and on my website if you want to go back and look at the previous videos, or if you want to watch this again, then this will be available on Facebook under the videos tab, or I'll add it to my website possibly Monday it'll be, when I get that done. And so yes, it'll be there to go back to, or if there's other people that you think would like it, would be interested, you can send them the link for that. As I say, I will put the picture of the finished piece on Facebook when it is finished. So that will probably take at least a few days of it sitting there while I look at it and go, what else do I need to do to it? But thank you very much for watching, and I hope everybody's safe and well. I hope your loved ones, families are all safe and well as well, and hopefully eventually we'll be able to I'll see you, whether it's an event or an actual workshop or something like that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for coming. I hope everybody keeps safe and well, and thank you very much if you're a key worker working at the minute, and please take care.